I want to talk about the culture of innovation. I'm going to do that by first just talking a little bit about innovation more generally, tell you what I mean by innovation, and give you a few key concepts and ways of framing what innovation is about. And then I'm going to turn to the central challenge, which is how do we create a culture of innovation. I'll just give you a heads up that I'm going to ask you to share with the group and with me the barriers to innovation in your own organization. I want you to start thinking about that. What are the barriers to innovation in your own organizations? And I'll share with you what I've heard from a lot of people around the world in companies about what they perceive as the barriers. And then we're going to turn to see if we can address some of those barriers, some of the cultural barriers to innovation. And I'm going to give you a way to think about that, hopefully maybe a new way to think about that in terms of things that I think you can do. Now that's my main agenda, is to talk about the culture of innovation. But I have a secondary agenda, which is to tell you a little bit about what's going on at the school. And so I'm going to use my role as Vice Dean of Innovation to talk a little bit about our innovation activities, what I've been doing at Wharton around culture of innovation, and use some examples from Wharton to just give you a little insight as to what we're up to. So let me start with just a couple definitions, what I mean by innovation. And I adopt a quite broad and very simple definition, which is that innovation is a new match between a solution and a need. And so in my schematic here, you can think of the arrows as solutions and the targets as needs. And what innovation does is puts together a new match. Now, often we think of innovation as the identification of a need and then the invention of some solution that addresses that need. And that is innovation for sure. That would be considered a market pull or a need-driven innovation. But innovation need not always happen that way. Sometimes what happens is there's an existing solution and you go and look and try to find a need that it would address. So that would be more of a tech push, solution-driven innovation. Or even the putting together in a new way of an existing solution and an existing need. If you look at that word innovation, it has that Latin root nova in it. And for me, really all it's essential is that something's new about it. And that in fact there is this match between solution and need. Now, not all innovation is successful, and I want to just give you my definition of success, which is very simple, which is simply that if you have the need, that you're willing to pay more for the solution than it costs to provide that solution, right? If you can do that, if the innovator and the customer can work out an arrangement where the solution is worth more to the holder of the need than to the provider, than it costs the provider to deliver the solution, then value has been created. That doesn't always happen in innovation, but it's what we hope for anyway. All right, now let me give some examples. Actually, first I want to just make a couple of distinctions. The first distinction is between internal and external innovation. And I think we're pretty comfortable with the notion of external innovation. External innovation means someone on the outside, a customer or another stakeholder, has the need, and you as the provider are delivering that. And an example that we're working on at Wharton, my group is working on, this photo was taken last week. We just kicked off a brand new program called Semester in San Francisco, in which we take students who are in the fall of their second year in our full-time program, and they spend the fall semester at our fantastic new San Francisco campus. It's right there on the Embarcadero. And most of them will have spent summer internships in the Bay Area. They just stay right on through December. And we've structured a curriculum around innovation and entrepreneurship for them in the fall semester. That's essentially a new service. It's a new service provided to, although I don't love the notion of students as customers, it's a pretty good analogy, right? So we have students who are, I don't like it because I don't like the way well, you understand why I don't like it, right? Because we like to take this position that we know best, and we're going to lead you through a process that lets you join a community of alumni, and we don't necessarily care whether what you think about the process, right? You understand why that is a delicate issue, let's just say. But it's a pretty good analogy, students as customers. And in that case, this is an example of an external innovation, right? It's a product or service delivered to, in effect, a customer group. All right, internal innovation is, and the key questions you ask in external innovation are basically a market question and a solution question. You ask, will it work? That's a solution question. And you ask, will they buy it? That's the market question, right? And those are, in almost all innovation, those are two questions you face. Is the need real, and does your solution work, right? Now, internal innovation is response to an opportunity for improvement in a business process, in something that you do internally. And I'm going to just give you an example. This is also from our innovation group, really mundane, but not atypical of internal innovation. It turns out that when we get our paychecks at Penn, if your pay is somewhat variable, as faculty pay is, because we do lots of different things, we get paid for doing different things, you don't know what you're being paid or why you're being paid it. You look at that number and say, is that really what I'm paid? I don't really know. And so that would result in lots of emails to business administrators saying, hey, would you check my paycheck and see if it's right and tell me why I got paid whatever I got paid? And so this idea bubbled up as an annoyance from the administrators, and we basically said, all right, we need to figure out, we need to develop a solution that will let an employee of the university understand why their paycheck says what it says. Can we do a line itemization of the top line of a paycheck? So we kicked off a little project, we understood the needs, we developed some alternatives, we implemented a solution. Sure enough, there's now a web-based app that lets you see why you're paid, what you're paid. All right, standard example of internal innovation. Turns out the questions you ask in internal innovation are actually not that different from internal innovation, are not that different from external innovation. Same two questions, which are basically, will it work and will they adopt it? I mean, you can build it and they may not come, right? And you face almost the same challenges. And so I put this up here to make two main points. Point number one is, even if you are not centrally concerned with creating new products or services, you're probably concerned in some way with internal improvement, and so you are still an innovator. All right, so that's point number one, which is innovation happens both internally and externally. And point number two is, they're not that different, that basically the challenges you face in internal innovation are very similar to what you face in external innovation. And so I'm going to treat them very similarly, and in fact, in our group at Wharton, if we look at our pipeline, the set of projects that we're facing as an innovation group, some of them are internal, some of them are external. Doesn't really matter. They're all very similar in terms of the way they feel. Okay. Second distinction I want to make is that not all innovation represents the same amount of risk or uncertainty. That is, some innovation opportunities present tremendous risk and uncertainty, and others present less risk and uncertainty. And I think it's very useful to think about risk and uncertainty as playing out in two dimensions. And one dimension, I'll explain this complex chart here in a moment, but one dimension is essentially the solution risk or uncertainty, and the other dimension is the market or need risk or uncertainty. So on the horizontal axis here, I've shown three different positions. One is the solution an existing solution that we already use? Is it an existing solution that someone uses but we don't yet use? Or is it a new to the world solution? So that on the solution dimension, if you think about an innovation, gives you a sense of how much risk or uncertainty is introduced in solution risk. All right. And on the vertical dimension here is the need or the market risk. And the axis here, the positions on the axis are, is it an existing need or market that we already serve? Is it a market that someone serves, so we know it exists, but we don't know anything about it? Or is it a new to the world market? Now, if you think about it, those two dimensions combine to create the risk or uncertainty of the innovation opportunity. And so what I've done here is I've drawn three bands, which I'm calling the uncertainty horizons. And I've created three categories: Horizon 1, Horizon 2, and Horizon 3. Now, I will, in the interest of full disclosure, say that I've cribbed those terms, Horizon 1, Horizon 2, and Horizon 3 from McKinsey. That's a McKinsey framework. This is adapted a little bit from the way they think about it, but I like it quite a lot. I think it's a nice way of thinking about it. Horizon 1 are opportunities that are right there in front of you. Process improvements, cost reductions, extensions to what you're doing. Horizon 2 is adjacencies. There's either an adjacency in the market space or an adjacency in the solution space. And Horizon 3 is some combination of a new-to-the-world solution or a new-to-the-world market. And that's all pretty abstract. Let me give you some examples from this week, from things we've seen in the news this week. iPhone 5 introduced yesterday. I know this isn't exactly Apple territory, so I'm sorry to use this example, but it's hard to ignore. It was yesterday. It was a big deal. But you'll probably like what I have to say about this. The iPhone 5, it's kind of a yawn. I mean, look at what Apple has to say about it. It's 2 millimeters thinner, and it's 40 pixels wider, and it has a little better battery life, right? It's very beautiful, though, right? It really is beautiful. So it is beautiful. This is Horizon 1 innovation, though, folks. This is Horizon 1. This is, you had iPhone 4, you made iPhone 5. Keyword, anytime you see product name and a numeral, once that numeral is up around 2, we're talking about Horizon 1 innovation. You already know there's gold in the ground here, right? So what are you going to do? You're going to move the mine over a few feet. You're not going to go exploring off in some new territory. You already know you've got something there. And Horizon 1 is and should be where most of your innovation effort goes. There's no shame in it. But it's Horizon 1, right? There's not that much uncertainty about this. All right. Okay, next example. Amazon? Where were our Amazon folks? All right, a few of them here. All right. So this was the first generation Kindle. Not the nicest device, honestly, but this was the first device, right? And it's gotten a lot better. But the first device, this was an adjacency for Amazon. And if you think about it, if we go back to this matrix, what was this? Well, this was taking an existing need and market that Amazon already serves and introducing a new solution for that need or market. So let me see if I can point here. So depending on how you think about e-ink and the reader technology and so forth, it was largely existing technology that Amazon wasn't using. So for Amazon, it's right around here, I would say. Meaning nothing truly invented, brought from other places, but brought together in a way that was certainly new for Amazon to address an existing market. That's Horizon 2 innovation, and it's in this dimension, right? Finding a new solution to address an existing need. All right. Another example from Amazon is Amazon Web Services. Not all of you know about Amazon Web Services, although all of you use them every day, whether you know it or not, which is a huge fraction of the current activity on the web is actually hosted by Amazon. Amazon runs virtual servers and storage for many, many of the companies, including some of the ones that I've started. So Amazon provides web services. Now, those of you who didn't know that are kind of scratching your head and saying, "Really? Amazon provides infrastructure to e-commerce and to the world?" And if you think about what that is, that's taking an existing solution that Amazon already uses and going vertically, right, to an adjacent market. It's not providing retail commerce to customers. It's taking this new service or this existing solution that Amazon already has and going into this adjacent market that they don't serve, which is infrastructure, right? So that's an adjacency in this direction, in the vertical dimension. Okay. The third example, which was also in the news this week, which is why I grabbed it. In retrospect, I really should have picked a similarly exciting product from innovation from Microsoft, but I apologize. So this is a Google product called Google Glass, And in case you've missed it, it's been in the news a lot this week. Google Glass is basically a display that mounts on a set of glasses that don't do vision correction, but rather provide information in your visual field of view. Runs on an Android operating system. And the idea is that it can enhance reality through the provision of information tied to whatever it is you're looking at. All right, so that you might be looking at down a street, and you would see displayed the menu items of the things you could buy at the stores coming down the street, something like that. All right, this I would consider a Horizon 3 innovation. It's a new to the world technology, although some borrowed from some smaller companies and some startups and some labs, but it's probably right around there on the solution dimension. And this is not a need that has been served yet. This is a conjecture that we might all find that useful, right? So this really sits right around here, I would argue, is a Horizon 3. All right? So that's a little framework for thinking about how much risk or uncertainty we take on in tackling an innovation opportunity. All right, so with that, I want to just pause for one moment here. And actually, let me pause on that slide. And I want to come back to the question I asked you to think about, which is, I want you to think about what are the barriers in your organization to innovation, to do any of these kinds of innovation. Who's got a barrier that they're frustrated by? Yeah, go ahead.
Short-term hit is profitability.
Okay, say it again.
Short-term hit is
Yeah.
profitability.
All right, so that's great. All right, so here's the proposition of innovation undeniably is I have to do something that involves risk and uncertainty and consumes cash in the hopes that in the future I will get a payback, right? That's the basic proposition. And I'll make it very personal. I got a phone call from Jason Wingard, who's our Vice Dean for executive education. And Jason said, you know, I really feel like we ought to be doing some innovation. There's a lot happening in the world. But I have committed to deliver to the dean $14 million in free cash this year. I don't know what, any dollar I spend on innovation is a dollar I won't be delivering to the school's operating budget. It's exactly that point. And even if it has positive present value, right? Even if you could take $1 million of that, put it in an investment, and its present value were $5 million, you promised $14 million this year, and we need the $14 million this year, right? So that's a really good one. All right. What else? That the only barrier? Yeah, Gordon. Say more. Well, let me rephrase, just make sure everyone got that, which is, look, I got my little gold mine here. I'm in Horizon 1. It's profitable. I can operate this thing. And now I'm faced with this prospect of doing something different. And by doing something different, I've just introduced a level of complexity to my business that in many ways may put at risk what I'm doing here, but will certainly detract from my ability to optimize, could potentially detract from my ability to optimize what I'm doing here, and is it worth it? In a way, it's another way of saying that I have to invest now at the risk, putting something at risk for some future prospect. Right, good. Yeah.
Accountability.
Yeah, say more.
Meaning,
yeah, there are all kinds of interesting incentive, performance evaluation, accountability issues, and they arise because of two pernicious characteristics, intrinsic characteristics of innovation, which I call lag and luck. All right? Which is, lag is that almost always there are big time delays, right? Which is you invest now and you may not get the payoff for some time period, probably after you've left the job, right? And, right? Yeah, especially for Horizon 2 and Horizon 3, and certainly for Horizon 3. Secondly, the value derived from any particular innovation opportunity is dependent on at least three things. First, how good an idea was it? Was there gold in the ground to begin with? Second is, how good were you at extracting the value from it? What were your capabilities? How good were you? And third, what was the price of gold? Like external, completely random factors. If you're in the energy business, did fracking technology come online and just cut the price of natural gas by a factor of 10 and completely destroy your business? It's not exactly your fault, right? It just happened. It was bad weather. And unfortunately, that's a fact of life. So now all of a sudden you try to put performance evaluation around that combination of things, lag and the fact that the weather has a lot to do with the outcome, very tricky, right? Because our normal methods of measuring performance don't work very well. It's hard to hold people accountable for innovation when there are these big uncertainties that they don't really control, and whether you don't realize the outcome for a long time in the future, right? So that's a good one too. Yeah, others, yeah.
I don't know, it's kind of implicit in your vertical axis that you...
Yes, so, and what you're saying is the risk, the barrier is uncertainty, right? That's where what you're saying. So the barrier is, we're anxious or uncomfortable with the notion of assuming this big risk that maybe that demand really isn't there. Maybe that need isn't really there. We're ill-equipped to assess that, and that makes us reluctant to take on that challenge. Yeah, that's good. All right, one more. Yeah.
Weak knowledge sharing across the organization. Possibility.
Yeah, all right, good. So there's a barrier. There is perhaps a lost opportunity in that in a large distributed organization, especially one that's really oriented towards customers, around customers, you could have the recognition or sensing of a gap in the user experience in one part of the organization. You could actually have the solution over here, and you could fail to be able to get the match to happen because you've optimized for one kind of responsiveness to customers, but you failed to optimize around the sharing of knowledge that might allow you to solve problems. That's a good one. That's good. All right, so let me show you what when I teach in our executive programs, when I teach innovation, we do a 1-week program on innovation. We spend one of the days just talking about these barriers. Let me just tell you what comes up a lot from others. It's very similar to what you just said, but let me just show you what comes up a lot. The three that come up quite a lot relate to culture. The thing that comes up most commonly is we lack an innovation culture. And as I've really drilled down as to what people mean by that, they seem to mean three things. All right? They mean we're risk averse. Well, what do we really mean by risk aversion? I think we mean two things, basically. They're basically the same thing, but let me just say them two different ways. So going back to school, what strictly do we mean by risk aversion? What we mean is that you would prefer a 90% chance at $1 million than a 25% chance at $4 million, right? In expectation, a 25% chance at $4 million is worth $1 million, but 3 out of 4 times you get nothing, right? So that's why, but it's worth $1 million in expectation, whereas 90% of $1 million is only worth $900,000. So you should, if you were risk neutral, you would prefer a 25% chance at $4 million. Corporations, you know from finance theory, should be risk neutral. Especially the kinds of corporations you work for, you're diversified across a bunch of stuff. Your investors can diversify across many different firms. You should just be optimizing expected value. But the reality is managers are not risk neutral. Managers are thinking about their careers. They're thinking about their success factors. They're thinking about, in our organization, we punish failure. We reward success. Do I really want to take a 25% chance at an outcome? That sounds pretty risky, right? Big barrier, because you should be taking 25% chances if in expectation the payoffs are high, right? So that's barrier number one. Barrier number two is we have a short-term perspective. It's exactly this one, right? Which is, yeah, I know it has positive NPV, but it still means I got to spend the cash now, and I need the cash. I want the cash, right? So it's a kind of what the psychologists would call a hyperbolic discounting. It's a very heavy discounting on the future and saying we're not willing to invest today to get something in the future. And then the last is that you hear a lot is we're slow and bureaucratic. You know, we're optimized around running the machine, and it's very hard for us to be agile in terms of doing something other than running the machine, right? So we hear that a lot. All right, so I hear those a lot. I've heard versions of those from you, so hopefully that resonates with you. And I want to turn to this question of culture. And first I want to say, well, what do we mean by culture? And I know when I think of corporate culture, I think about some corporations that have very strong cultures. And so one of those is Southwest Airlines. It's so strong, you can feel it when you check in or when you go on the plane, right? It's, wow, they hire a different kind of person, or those people get assimilated into this culture, but it's quite striking. And so I pulled up a slide, I found online that articulates their culture. And you know, warrior spirit and other kinds of stuff. If you were to look, kind of say, what do we mean by culture? I put down here a definition. It's the set of shared mental assumptions that guide interpretation and action. It's basically, collectively, what do we value and believe that leads us to make certain choices and behaviors in our organization. And when we talk about risk aversion, short-term thinking, punishing failure, that's all culture, right? That's all what we believe or value in our organization. All right. Now, let me now give you my take on this and my thinking about how to respond, or how to kind of turn to the central topic. How do we create a culture of innovation? I want to start by saying, when we say culture of innovation, we mean something more than just a healthy overall corporate culture, right? And I want to start by saying that there are some universally accepted values that there's 100% agreement that it would be good to have them in our organization. You can ignore the stuff at the top here for a moment, but I put those down here as kind of a foundational thing. They're universally desirable elements of culture, and this is things like reliability, trust, recognition, cooperation, stuff like that. I mean, we pretty much uniformly agree that needs to be there. And I want to just go on the record as saying that's not culture of innovation. That's just good corporate culture, and we need that stuff. And if you don't have that, you know, you kind of got to go back and start with the basics, all right? And my kids I was looking at this and I was thinking, my kids go to a Quaker school in Philadelphia. And I'm not Quaker, they're not Quaker, but I like the Quaker values. Those are Quaker values. It's like, you got to have the kind of Quaker values before you even get to culture of innovation. All right. Respect for the individual, there's a little bit of God in everyone. I mean, it's totally unobjectionable, good stuff. You know, it's just, that's kind of the foundational values for corporations. All right. Now, the second idea I want to get across here is that there is no culture of innovation. There are cultures of innovation. And the argument I want to make is that the culture of innovation you need to do Horizon 1 innovation is completely different from the culture of innovation you need to do Horizon 3 innovation. Now, let me start with Horizon 1, all right? And I want to tell you about my painter, Joel. This is Joel. He's a house painter. And Joel was painting my house. I shot a photo of him because this was so interesting. So I shot a photo of Joel, I was watching Joel paint, and I saw he had a cardboard box of paint supplies, and on the side, someone in a Sharpie had drawn a diagram of the Schuhart cycle, PDCA. It's called Plan, Do, Check, Out. Any of you trained in total quality management have heard it. It's a basic problem-solving process. And then over on the side, there was these Japanese characters, and in quotes, Kaizen. I thought, that looks like kind of like a slide from my MBA course in operations. What is that doing on the side of the paint? It's like, whoa, mind warp here. Like, what is going on here? So I said, Joel, what's the deal? He said, oh yeah, he said, you know, Kaizen, it's it's really important to my guys. We train. He said, let me show you a few things. So he pulled this out of his pocket. I said, oh, your lips are chapped. He has Carmex. He said, no, I got to show you. He said, one of my guys said, we're always looking for the spackle to fill the holes. And so he said, if we could just find a way to have a little bit of spackle with us all the time, we wouldn't have to be going back and forth to the spackle thing. So he said, so he went to Walmart and he bought a 10-pack of Carmex and he put them in the dishwasher, cleaned everything out, and then he filled them with spackle and he gave them to all the guys. So we all carry spackle right here in this little pocket in a little Carmex container. He said, let me show you this other thing. He said, we're having to take pins out of hinges all the time, and we're having to set nails all the time. So what I did, I took this little, the nail set, and I ground down the end so that we can use the same tool to pop the pin out. And so those are the two things we carry in the side pocket, is the multi-tool and the Carmex. Like, whoa, that's my painter who's doing that. And he said, painting, you got to say, it's actually a pretty easy business because it's the least common denominator of workforce. And if you can just get in there and apply Kaizen to this business, you can make a lot of money. So that was his take on this. All right. Now, let me make an assertion. Why do I tell you about Joel? In my view, there's essentially no industry, none of the ones that you work at, where you don't need the basic culture of Horizon 1 innovation, which is, are you measuring performance? Are you focused on your customer? Do you have a culture of process improvement? Do you have some kind of PDCA process where you're able to recognize opportunities, try them out, implement them, improve them, document them? This is all the Six Sigma, TQM, process improvement kind of world. Now, there may be a few where the industries where I was thinking today, is there anywhere that you don't want this in your corporate culture? Can anyone think of any examples? I can think of maybe two. It's hard. I think you just want this, all right? The only ones I can think of, it may be the case that you don't want some military operations. What you want is absolute adherence to a protocol and no innovation. Like, no, this is what we want. It may be that because of the way McDonald's, for instance, has structured their workforce, what they want with a very transient workforce, no innovation. Like, we have a set of rules. We don't want you PDCAing the burger process. We want you just following the book, right? But they're very rare. In essentially every other organization, you want this. I mean, the painter benefits from it. Believe me, you benefit from that culture of innovation. So I'm going to call that table stakes. All right, table stakes for your organization is essentially, you've got the Quaker values and you've got Horizon 1, basic problem solving. I'm calling that Management 101. That's Management 101. It is innovation, but it's Horizon 1 innovation. It's about focus on the customer, measuring the output, recognizing gaps, having a process improvement process. You should be doing that, and if you aren't, you don't want to be thinking about Horizon 2 and Horizon 3. This is kind of table stakes. All right. Now, so I've argued essentially everybody needs that, and I hope you actually already have it. All right. The second element of my argument is most of you have no business doing Horizon 3. Just don't even bother. All right, now let me show you why that's the case. There are actually two reasons it's the case. By Horizon 3, by the way, I'm meaning Google Glass. Like, it's out there. It's really out there. There's a really interesting question is whether Google has any business doing it. But most organizations have no business doing Horizon 3. Here are the reasons. First reason, pioneers almost universally fail. All right, now people argue about first mover advantages. The first mover advantage, except in a very, very few industries, is a myth. Historical analysis shows the first movers almost never prevail. All right, and here's a long list. I won't go through them all, but from cable television to the video cassette reporter, who made the first commercial attempt who had the first real commercial product, and who actually made money from the innovation. And with almost no exceptions, there are a few. The only exception on this list, I believe, is Motorola actually made money in cell phones until about 2000. And they were basically the inventor of cell phones. Yeah, Gordon.
Well, the glasses you're showing Google were originally out in Human Interface Technology Labs at UW.
Yeah, I'm not even sure they were the pioneer, right? Yeah.
They've been doing all the virtual work for the
Yeah.
military. So we financed that in 1990. A company called Microvision. It's still around. And now finally Google.
But they're not going to be on the list. Microvision is not, exactly. So this comes as a great shock to people, but when you actually look at the historical evidence, the pioneers almost never prevail. And the first mover advantage is a myth. If you are an incumbent and you've got your Horizon 1 stuff, you are almost always better off waiting and either acquiring or copying. At this moment, I could invoke Microsoft and say, Microsoft has mastered that, and there's a reason Microsoft was. It's a great strategy. It really is a great strategy. All right. The second reason you don't want to be in Horizon 3 is the capabilities you need in Horizon 3 are completely different from the capabilities you need in Horizon 1. Let me give an example. So if you look at Coca-Cola, and I've had this conversation with them, they say, we're terrible at recognizing the new opportunities, and finally we've just accepted that. We're terrible at it. But once the opportunity is recognized, there is no one on the planet that is better at moving millions and millions of cases a week of that product. Now, it actually turns out that's just the way it is, that the capabilities you need to move millions of cases a week have nothing to do with the capabilities you need to discover the next Red Bull. Red Bull was created by an Austrian toothpaste supply sales guy who on a visit to Thailand noticed that truck drivers were drinking this thing that was called Red Bull. And he started mixing it up in his kitchen, and then he started distributing it in bars from the back of his car, and he eventually got this thing going, created a completely new category of, I don't know, nasty stuff that has caffeine, and I mean, I don't know, I mean, who would have thought, right, that would become a multi-billion-dollar category. But that's exploration. What Coke does is exploitation. They're completely different capabilities. In fact, I put them on that, let's see, where did I put them? Yeah, here on the graph. You don't have to read all that, but just as, what are the elements of culture there? Irrational optimism, vivid imagination and possibility, adaptive and dynamic planning, tenacious commitment, enthusiastic tech push. Does that sound like your organization? No. And it's okay. It's okay because those guys are crazy. They will go and enter irrationally because they love it. And once they figure it out, you're gonna copy or acquire, and then you're gonna apply your considerable talents at exploiting opportunity to make a lot of money from it, right? So it's just, the argument I want to make is stay out of Horizon 3. All right, now that actually makes this problem somewhat simpler, which is once we've said Horizon 1 is table stakes, and Horizon 3, you can't do it. It's basically impossible, at least the empirical regularity is, it's impossible to do both Horizon 3 and Horizon 1. The real question is, how do you do Horizon 2? All right? And Horizon 2 has this distinctive characteristic to it, which is it's adjacent in some way. But the main distinctive characteristic is it has much lower probabilities of success than Horizon 1. So if you look at Horizon 1, the probability of success, that's what I mean by POS there, probability of success. Horizon 1 stuff is 75 to 100% likely you're going to succeed. It actually works just fine to reward people based on project performance. If you've got a 75 to 100% chance of success, and these projects are typically 1 to 2 years, you can evaluate people on the basis of how well did they do on that. Once you go to Horizon 2, the odds of success are now more in the 25 to 75% range, and now we have this risk aversion problem, right? Because now it's hard to step out and take a 25% chance on something, even if it has big payoff. And so that's what's hard. That's why it's hard. At least that's why I think it's hard. All right, so now let me turn to what I think you can do about that. And I'm going to explain in the context of what we've done at Wharton, which I think have been pretty good things. So table stakes are Quaker values in Management 101. You're going to stay out of Horizon 3, and I'm sure we'll have a long discussion after about whether I'm right about that or not. And then the middle, so the question is, what do we do about Horizon 2? All right, so here's what I think you do. First, let me give a little philosophy here, which is, I think you can think about the contributors to innovation success as being a three-legged stool here. And the three legs are, you have to have the right people. If you don't have the people who have the relevant knowledge base and capabilities, you're not going to get the job done. You have to have the right culture. That is, they have to have the values and beliefs that are supportive of getting the innovation done. And you have to have the right strategy, structure, and process. All right? Now, I've always, until about a year ago, when I would teach this stuff in executive groups, I would argue these were three legs of the stool. You got to work on each one. All three are important. And what I've come to believe is that you should start with strategy, structure, and process. And if you can get that right, in general, the culture and the people will follow. All right? And that it's nearly impossible to try to force the culture if you have the wrong strategy, structure, and process. That is, if you're saying one thing and your strategy, structure, and process aren't consistent with that, you won't change the culture. And so let me illustrate what I mean more concretely, because that's a little abstract. So let me just tell you what we've done at Wharton. So the first thing I think you do to try to get Horizon 2 to happen in your organization is you create a central resource, a centralized resource that represents an unspecified pool of resources for spending on innovation. And that pool can be very small. So in our case, we've taken 1/2 of 1% of our budget. It's 1/2 of 1%. School's budget's about $350 million. We've taken about $1.5 million, $1.7 million, and said, every year, we're going to spend that on Horizon 2 innovation. And this is my budget now, including our people and everything. It's $1.7 million. And I don't have to tell you what that's going to be. We don't know what it's going to be. All right? And if you can't do that, if you can't get that commitment, that budgetary commitment from senior management, then what you're basically saying is you're not going to innovate. You're not going to be in Horizon 2. Because you're basically saying, I'm not willing to trade off short-term and long-term. If you can't carve out 1/2 of 1% of your revenues for that kind of investment, you're basically saying, I don't believe that those investments have positive NPV, that they will pay off in the future. If you do believe it, then you have to be willing to put up that money. But what's critical there is that there's a carve-out and that it's unspecified. You are not going to tie it to a particular project. You're going to say, we are going to invest that in a set of activities, a set of projects that collectively will have a return. All right, so what our dean did was to say, all right, one of our pillars is innovation. We're going to fund that at 1/2 of 1%. And so we created a group, 4 people, created some budget, said, all right, and we're not going to tie that to any particular project. We're going to rely on you to figure out what those Horizon 2 opportunities are. Yeah?
By defining the budget before you define the projects, aren't you constraining the innovation?
Right. So the question, a great question. So the question is, defining the budget before you define the project, aren't you constraining what you're doing? And first of all, it violates the rule of capital budgeting, right? Which is that in general, in capital budgeting, you don't want to put up the money until you know what you're investing in, because you want to compare the NPV across compare the rate of return across these different projects. Right, but you can't do that analysis at this point. And so when I had that conversation with my boss, the conversation was, we don't know if this is the right level of funding. What we're going to do is each year, we're going to look at the portfolio. We're going to make a subjective judgment, because you can't really make a quantitative judgment typically. We're going to make a subjective judgment of, are we spending too much or too little? Like, should we be spending more or less? What kind of return did we get on that pool? But yeah, but you can't analyze it because you don't know what it's going to be. You don't know what those projects are going to be. It has to be an unspecified pool. And I think that's really critical. And that's what I told Jason, our head of exec ed. I said, even if it's $100,000, you have to fight for carving out an unspecified pool that you're going to invest in the future. And then you decide, was that not enough? Was that too little? Based on what you do with it over the first year. Now, that leads me to my second point. You have to take a portfolio perspective on this. So looking instead of looking at any particular project, what you do is you look at the bucket of projects. All right, so this is our portfolio in the Innovation Group. And I actually just pulled this. This was the exact slide that I sat down with my boss, with our dean, in May and said, all right, here's what we did last year, and here's what we're doing. This is the portfolio. I don't want you to evaluate whether we failed at any one of these. I want you to look at the collection of these and say, in the aggregate, did we add value? And that's how you get over the 25% problem. Because now I'm willing to say, I'll take on this bundle, because I think as a bundle, we did some great stuff. I don't really want to put my name against any one of those and be held accountable, because I know that I have a 75% chance of failing at any one of those, right? So what isn't shown here, this is about, by the way, this thing is one of these projects, by the way, right? So this is all kind of a little weird and meta here. And what you're not seeing here is there are 118 ideas that are in the pipeline that aren't shown on this slide. And those are, I would say, pre-investment. We're just ideas, researching, thinking about. All right, so aggregate investment of some amount, and then a portfolio logic in terms of how you evaluate how those investments are. Okay, and the last thing I want to do, all right, I have 1 minute. And I'm going to take 3. All right, so I'm going to hold you you're going to have been in this seat for 62 minutes instead of 60. I hope we're okay. All right. So So the other thing I want to say here is that some of you know I wrote a book. Some of you heard me talk about innovation tournaments, which is a particular mechanism for identifying and selecting opportunities. And in an innovation tournament is I found a remarkably effective way to kickstart that Horizon 2 activity. So I just want to tell you quickly about one of them. Those of you who were at Reunion in May heard me talk about this, but I'll just do it in 3 slides. So we ran a tournament at Penn Medicine, which is 10,000 employee health system at the University of Pennsylvania, called Your Big Idea, which was focused on improving the patient experience at Penn Medicine. That was the challenge. We had 5,000 of the 10,000 employees of the health system participate and submit ideas, comprising 1,739 ideas. So there they are. We put those through a multi-stage process. There they are. Identified 9 finalists. They made presentations, and the health system went off and implemented actually many of these, but 2 were flagged as kind of the big winners, as it were. All right. It is virtually impossible. This is an example of structure and process. It is virtually impossible to do this and not change culture. Because look what you had to do. You had to commit the resources, you had to make your process transparent, and you had to take action as a result of these activities. That is, you've moved the culture, and you've moved it by changing structure and process. So I'm totally sold on, I didn't know that's where I would end up with this innovation tournament stuff. I took a kind of technical view of it as being a way to identify great ideas. And what I've come to believe is that it's a very powerful way to move culture. Visible, it demonstrates commitment, it gets good answers, it makes the process transparent, remarkably effective. Okay, so let me wrap up and say, how do you create a culture of innovation? Well, the first thing to recognize is you got to fix the Quaker values in Management 101 first. If you're not there, then you don't have a culture of innovation problem. You just have a culture problem. All right, so that's, I just start that and argue that for completeness. Second main idea is that changing culture directly is hard, squishy, amorphous, I'm not even sure how you do it. Maybe you talk a lot, I guess. But I believe that the direct lever on culture is structure and process. You change structure and process, culture will follow. At least it's easier for culture to follow. Probably you let go of Horizon 3. That narrows your problem to how do we get Horizon 2 innovation to happen in the organization. Here's how you get to happen. Make an aggregate general investment in exploration start with somewhere between 1/4 and 0.5% of your revenues that you're going to carve out, invest in an unspecified way in a portfolio. You're going to assign some kind of central organizational responsibility so that you can keep track of that portfolio. In our case, it's an innovation group. You're going to explicitly manage that portfolio and pipeline so you know what's in it, so you know how it's doing as a whole. And innovation tournaments are a highly visible lever, highly visible way to kickstart that change management process. Okay, so with that, I will technically end, but why don't I take a couple of questions, comments, and then we'll just let it spill right over into discussion. Who's got a, yeah?
For your portfolio management, did you think about explicitly saying, hey, let me create diversity within the portfolio deliberately?
Yes. So the question is, in terms of portfolio management, did we deliberately try to create diversity? So I'm gonna make a pointer to the innovation tournaments work. In fact, I've got a book, Innovation Tournaments. You can get it on Amazon for just a few bucks. It's a bargain, that's one of our central arguments, is that the way you improve performance of tournaments is, in addition to having a lot of ideas, is you increase the variance in the ideas. And so absolutely, I feel pretty strongly about that. The main way you do that is you introduce variance in the sources of the ideas.
So that was kind of where the next question would be then, because you said your group was based on 4 people. So then where was your idea generation?
Yeah, so the 118, so what we did, we use an idea management tool called Brainstorm. There are lots of them out there. Some of you have your own or homegrown ones, but those 118 ideas have come from about 350 of the 600 members of our staff at the Wharton School. So we reached out. That was actually one of our projects, was the Brainstorm idea management system. And we had to sell that. We had to try to get people to adopt it. I would say we have not been yet wildly successful at that, but we did get at least almost half, a little more than half of the staff to participate. And those 118 resulted from that activity. Yes, a critical part of that process. Yeah, go ahead.
So certainly the portfolio for innovation works really well at the management level, but as you dig deep, as people get more involved in things, obviously down to the individual contributors, they're going to be much more invested in singular ideas
Right.
that very likely will fail. And that seems very difficult to manage. And you've got 3 people, one of them worked on the thing that knocked it out of the park.
Right? Because the weather was good.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Back to the same problem.
Yeah, it's a great question. At some point, somebody owns a project that has a 25% chance of success. What do you do about that? Well, I think the short answer is that you're not going to use a Salesforce compensation model with that person, right? I mean, you think about the way salespeople are compensated. Typically, their inputs translate into results. A lot of their inputs are unobservable, and so you just look at the results. And the time cycles are shorter than a year typically, and so you compensate based on output. When you have lag and luck, then you have to do 2 things. The first is you're much more reliant on subjective judgments of how well people are doing. The second thing is you're basically measuring the inputs, not the outputs. So you're looking at, did they work hard? Did they use good process? Did they collaborate? You look at the inputs rather than the output, because lag and luck will destroy your ability to use the output to measure performance. But that's a nice insight. Okay, let me take this one. Yeah, good question. So do you need Horizon 3 people to achieve Horizon 2 results? And let me frame that a different way, which is, if you're really going to succeed, at any innovation. Do you need someone who will quit their job if they don't get to work on it, who is incredibly passionate about it, who really believes, and yes, I guess you'd like to believe that even Joel is really passionate about, you wouldn't believe how enthusiastic he was about telling me how he'd use so I think you can have enthusiasm, commitment, high performance in Horizon 2. So some of those attributes of Horizon 3, I agree, are probably you want to see even in Horizon 1. So I hear you on that. Yeah, I don't know. I got to think it's a good challenge to that question. Yeah. Okay. Last one. Yeah. Yes. Go ahead.
I would also argue that perhaps if you create a platform, oftentimes the Horizon 3 projects are very vertical or very niche projects, especially kind of in the tech world. And so you can create a platform and then have people out in the marketplace create those specific vertical Horizon 3 projects. It's similar to what Microsoft did with Connect, or
Well, that's if you think about what's going on with Google Glass. I think, well, first of all, just a little editorial on that. I think a lot of what's going on with Google Glass is just PR for Google, right? I mean, you've got Sergey out there with the models, and it's in all the media. I mean, it just makes Google look good, right? So I think that probably pays for every dime they've spent on Google Glass, right? Having said that, I think it's pretty cool. I think it's pretty interesting. We have no idea where it's gonna play out, and it could be they're gonna put out a developer version of that thing, right? It's gonna have a generic Android OS and be a device, and people are gonna figure out really cool stuff to do with it. And so that's a pretty interesting notion that maybe what is a Horizon 2 innovation for Google, or just on the edge of Horizon 3, could spawn all kinds of really interesting stuff out there in the ecosystem more broadly. That's really interesting. And that could be, it's, I think, a more nuanced version maybe of that strategy. We're going to end, and I'm going to hang around, so hopefully we can continue this conversation.